Hey guys, and welcome to the latest episode of the movie discussion Pocket Dimension, where time does not exist and the only thing that matters is film. As always, I'm Cole, joined by Jay. We're a little bit late tonight, but we did make it. We're here for this week's episode on a film that just sort of popped into my head kind of randomly a few days ago. I really can't say what it was that prompted it. Usually when these things happen, Jay and I have little discussions about things, or maybe something that I was reading about, or some other movie. You do like a 6 Degrees thing where there's some sort of chain of events, something linking this makes me think of this person, which makes me think of that. This was kind of out of nowhere, but I'm glad we did it because it was a film that I had actually never seen, and that is Richard Stanley's cyberpunk sort of cult classic, I guess you could call it. At least in Britain, I say. It has that status. It's kind of less known over here, but Hardware, 1990. So it was a film I'd been aware of for many years. I knew kind of everything you could know about it almost without actually seeing it. So I figured it was well past time I'd seen it, and I saw it, liked it, and thought it would definitely be a good thing to do an episode on as we try to explore every corner, if we can, of the cinematic world. And Richard Stanley is an interesting one because more or less I heard about him and his work in the way a lot of people, I think, did, in that he was the guy who was a director for what was supposed to be a big film, The Island of Dr. Moreau. What was that, like 95 or 96? And he was the original director. There was all sorts of problems on set, and he wound up getting fired. And whenever you have those sorts of situations with films, it usually makes for a pretty good story, and people talk about it, and sometimes you even get a documentary, and there's been a documentary of this for a few years about that. And it's a really entertaining documentary, and he is in it, and he gives his insight on it and stuff, because it's just a really interesting journey when you think about it. Yeah, it was going to be a big sort of mainstream film with some big mainstream names in it, whereas he was a director who was he wasn't mainstream. He wasn't well known before that, but he'd had enough sort of modest, sort of independent style successes that I guess, however things work in Hollywood and stuff, that he was given the reins for this fairly high profile movie. And yet he wound up getting fired over the troubled production, years later in hindsight when you're reading about this and you watch the documentary stuff. It seems pretty apparent that it didn't really have much, it wasn't exactly that it was his fault. It's hard to pin all the blame on him, but somebody had to go. And then they brought in a director who, it wasn't necessarily a really great director or anything like that, but he basically had a reputation of a guy that got stuff done on time. And that was all they really wanted at that point. And that's how the movie got made. And of course, the movie itself is pretty forgettable, kind of, I don't want to say garbage completely, but it's a pretty forgettable, stupid movie. And the story behind it is much more interesting than the finished product, which is just sort of at times incoherent and uninteresting film, really, even though The Island of Dr. Moreau, the story is a really great story, and you think that's really great source material to make a good movie, and yet in that case, it's not what happened.
I would say watch The Island of Lost Souls.
Okay, so that's what the documentary's called,
yeah.
Right? Yeah, The Island of Lost Souls.
No, that's what the original Dr. Moreau film was called.
Okay, yes, that's right. What is the documentary called?
That's a great movie. The documentary is it is something about lost souls, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's in the title too, which confused me. But yeah, you're right. They did actually make some sort of decent adaptation. They just used a slightly different title, which is kind of odd.
Just Lost Soul: The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau.
Right.
But yeah, I think watching the documentary and then watching the film, it makes the film a lot more enjoyable, knowing all of the stuff behind it. Because I saw the film in the theater. I saw it in the theater when it came out, and it's a mess, really, because it's got a lot of things going against it. Because for one thing, it's filmed in some remote location somewhere where it rains all the time, and it's really uncomfortable for the actors. But you've got Val Kilmer, who's notoriously hard to work with. You've got
and apparently he was just a complete, class A dick on the set of this movie.
Absolutely, and Marlon Brando, who's even more of a harder guy to work with. And Richard Stanley is probably his biggest movie to date. So you know, it was a lot for him to take in, and he was probably doomed from the beginning with all those things against him.
Right, because he's not this well-established director. He's this South African guy who had done some British films of modest success most people haven't heard of, and now you have big names like Brando that have no respect for him. They're not going to listen to him, and they're just going to act up and do whatever they want. And I can just imagine how frustrating that must be for Stanley to try to rein in these big egos and stuff. And in the end, the project got away from him. Although, as far as I'm sure he would have, if he hadn't been fired, he would have seen it through to the end one way or another. He strikes me as a professional guy that would have done that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a case of like, you know, the guy that did Deer Hunter and stuff that we talked about. I can't think of his name right off, but you know, the guy who did Heaven's Gate,
Michael Cimino.
Yeah, Michael Cimino.
Yeah,
you know, I don't think he's like that where he's just like wasting money hand over
I don't think so at all.
It's really sad because it seemed like that kind of steamrolled Stanley's career.
Yeah, I mean, it changed his whole career trajectory, right? Because this was like his chance to have a movie, a mainstream movie with mainstream stars and break in big budget, and he winds up getting fired from it. It's inconsequential, basically, the movie's dismal failure without him. And since then, he's just sort of done odd little projects. He hasn't done any, you know, really, he's done some weird documentary stuff and things here and there, and I don't know how much of that is his own choice or if that was just because that was what he was left with. He didn't have the option to say, you know, do some, they're like, oh, here's some movie with Bruce Willis. No, they're not offering that to him.
Yeah.
So
had that not happened, though, man, he could be one of the most successful directors right now. I think he's got that kind of talent.
Yeah, I think he has a very unique sort of voice, and he was so young that he's 50 now, so he was actually very young. Wow. You know, when he's making his first few movies to be as a director, which is impressive. I mean, he's not the only one, but I mean, still,
so he was like mid-20s when he was making these movies.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Hardware is his first feature-length film. He'd done some smaller independent things, and he'd worked as like a lot of directors. He directed some music videos in the 80s too. I looked them up. It's not really any artists I'm familiar with.
Well, I think a lot of the artists that are featured in this movie, that "This Is What You Want, This Is What You Get" song, I think he directed a few of their videos after this movie.
No, that's funny.
Forget the name of that band. It's Public Image Limited.
Yeah, I just looked it up on YouTube a little while ago. I wanted to hear it again and stuff, and people were saying that I guess it first sort of showed up in an episode of Miami Vice in 1984.
Oh, okay. It was before. Okay.
Yeah. You know, I was too young to watch Miami Vice when it was on, but I know that was a big part of that show, was like showcasing, like, you know, hip songs. Like, that would be a big part. They'd be driving out to get somewhere, and they'd drive for 4 minutes just so an entire song could play, because that was more important. That was more important than the plot, was like to get this cool hot song in there. And yeah, I know that, like, that show was really very tied into MTV and the MTV crowd and those young people that were all into what was hip and cool and stuff. And so I wasn't surprised at all that they find out that song, like, sort of got sort of famous and known through inclusion on that show. That's kind of cool. It fits into this movie well too, though. It's got sort of a futuristic kind of vibe to it.
Having watched it again, I think it's a bit overused. But,
yeah.
That'd be one of my only complaints about the music. I love the soundtrack.
I think the soundtrack is very fitting. It definitely fits into the world that's created.
So it's so perfect. Like, there's a Ministry track that they play. Yeah. And I've always been a big Ministry fan. So, but yeah, the odd thing is when she, I know we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but when she plays the television, the video is actually for a Gwar video, but the music is Ministry.
I could tell it was definitely Gwar because, well, they're one of the most visually distinctive bands of all time. It's like, I'm not mistaking them for anyone else. That's Gwar.
Yeah, I was like, did Ministry go through a phase where they like put costumes on and stuff? I didn't remember that.
No, it's just how they mixed it, I guess.
Well, it works.
But yeah, so to get to the setup for people that haven't seen the film or whatever. So this is a, sort of a cyberpunk type movie. Back when that wasn't really a big thing. it had sort of gotten going days, and we will talk about how, well, just how that genre or subgenre has evolved over time. And I'll just say right now, it's one of my absolute favorites. I love cyberpunk. It's like all my, like, so much of my favorite stuff is cyberpunk, and really the origins go back to the ultimate, and I worship at the altar of the almighty Blade Runner, which is really what kicked it off. There were really two things: Blade Runner for movies, and then the 1984 novel Neuromancer, which is finally going to get a film adaptation. That's finally been okayed. There's going to be a green light for that. I don't know who's involved yet. I do actually, but I can't remember now. But I just read about that a few weeks ago, that they're going to make a Neuromancer film, which I'm kind of on the fence about, because it's a really cool book. And it was so much like Blade Runner. It was so ahead of its time, to the point that, like, the author, who I'm blanking on, hold on, it'll come to me. But he wrote, like, the book came out in '84, and he wrote, and he used a lot of sort of like future speak and slang and stuff, to the point that contemporary people reading the book in 1984, there was a lot of stuff they had to guess at, or just, to figure out through context, much in the way, like, if you were reading, say, A Clockwork Orange or something like that, right? He makes up some of the stuff, but through context, you figure it out. Same sort of thing. But nowadays, like, if you've never read the book before, but here we are in 2017, if you pick up the book and read it, you have a lot less trouble, because he actually coined terms and stuff that are completely normal and accepted now. The stuff he made up is now the accepted usage for things. So that's pretty interesting. It's like he looked into the future and, like, pulled out some of our slang and invented it. But yeah, so this film, I always have to compare any sort of cyberpunk to basically Neuromancer and Blade Runner, because I think those things started. And I think this film does a great job of mixing elements from both. And what I think some people, I don't know, a lot of people, but I'm sure there's quite a few people that have seen this film that are unaware of the fact that it was made to the point they actually wind up getting sued over it, and then they wound up putting in a credit for it. And that the story, although written by Richard Stanley, it was inspired by a short story in the very famous British sci-fi anthology comic book 2000 AD. That's been around since the late 70s, and has, introduced some of the great stories and writers to the world, especially in comics. Like, if you know a famous British comic artist, well, he probably did some work at 2000 AD before he came over. Warren Ellis is like the big exception, but everybody else, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman, of course, too, all those guys, they've all been over there. But and they did lots of stuff. But anyway, so this short story was the inspiration for this. And what people, I figure it's worth bringing up, is that the short story was set in the same universe, the same world as probably the most famous title in 2000 AD, the one that, everybody knows, which is Judge Dredd. And even though the movie doesn't necessarily mean to play it that way, you can watch the movie and totally believe that this is in the Judge Dredd world. Everything fits in and clicks. The only thing missing is the judges, but at the same time, it's almost believable that they're in a part of a city where they just don't have judges. Sure. Like, what's funny is if you watch, the train wreck 95 Stallone film Judge Dredd. Oh,
it's an amazing film.
It completely, utterly fails to convey what life in a mega city's like. Whereas this film does a tremendous job, even though it officially doesn't have any ties to Judge Dredd. So that's a cool way to watch the film too, is just think of it being in Judge Dredd's world, because even though they do use the word New York and stuff, although that's not entirely wrong, because it's not like New York didn't exist, and they're just saying that New York is gone now, because he's talking about digging in the ruins of New York. Mm-hmm. Because just to fill people in who aren't as familiar, I need a refresher on the world of Judge Dredd. It's very much like what we see in this world, where it's like radiation, whatever, has made most of the world just sort of desert, inhabitable wastelands. But there are cities, and they are called mega cities, and they're huge, and they stretch for miles, and they stretch for hundreds of miles. Where, like, the mega city one, where Judge Dredd is, it stretches geographically, I think, from, like Boston down to where Washington, D.C. is. Like, it's all that. So it's just cities that go on and on and on and on. So there's layers and layers. And this, and it's easy to watch this movie and just say, well, this is one of the mega cities. Here's a little piece of a mega city. Anyway, it enhanced my enjoyment of the film, and it is really consistent with the look and feel and stuff that are described in the Judge Dredd comics. So that's pretty cool. And something that I really enjoy about the film.
This is Steve McManus? He wrote the story you're talking about?
It sounds right.
Shock?
Yeah, Shock. That's what it's called, yes. It's called Shock.
Let's see. I believe Steve McManus and Kevin O'Neill.
Kevin O'Neill. Yeah, Kevin O'Neill.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to track that down.
Yeah.
You can find that somewhere.
Yeah, Kevin O'Neill's a really good artist. He was the lead artist for, I think, Alan Moore's original run of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I've got the omnibus, and it's got all his art. Really great artist, Kevin O'Neill. But yeah, like a lot of these British writers and artists, a lot of them had their start back in like the 70s and 80s in 2000 AD, which is just a prolific, really far-reaching in the world of comics. It's one of one of the big prestigious names. Mm-hmm. With the futuristic title of 2000 AD, well, it was basically because they never thought it would run this long. Like, nobody who made it in 1977 ever thought that it would still be ongoing well into the 21st century, or that it would become the, respected institution that it is, which is pretty cool. But yeah. I guess, what is it? They did sue them. And then later they had to put in like a credit to those two in the credits for the film to, here it is, the strip's publisher, Fleetway Publications. But yeah, so we get the story of how it opens with a lone. It's too bad in a way. I mean, I like to keep him mysterious, but I always thought it was kind of too bad that we don't get to see more of this this junk collector guy or scavenger guy. So it has the very iconic opening of the scavenger guy with his like gas mask on and stuff, going through the zone, as they call it, very desolate desert, and coming across the remnants of some sort of robot. And taking it, and he takes it into the city, and he brings it to, I guess, a well-known junk dealer or whatever you want to call it. And instead of dealing with him directly, the guy's off on break. He deals with our main character, Mo, short for Moses, I believe. And he actually haggles with him a bit and buys the stuff. And the guy doesn't give him any argument, leaves off, and that's how we get to where we are. But yeah, and what's going to happen is eventually that robot is going to revive itself and prove to be a very deadly machine that is its prime directive is basically to kill humans, and we find out about that. So in many ways, like, there's a lot of similarities to the Terminator, and I kind of view this movie as kind of like a low budget punk rock Terminator. Now at the same time, I think there's people that like resent that sort of comparison.
If I hadn't seen that, is one of the criticisms of this film, calling it like a knockoff or a copycat.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have even made that comparison at all.
Yeah, I see the comparison, but I don't think it's some sort of derivative or copycat or anything like that. I mean, sure, it's a killer robot, but I mean, the Terminator doesn't own the rights to killer robots. I mean, come on. Killer Robot has been around ever since robots have been around in any sort of fiction. So the only real thing here is, you've got this thing that's got like glowy eyes, which is kind of reminiscent of the Terminators when they're stripped down to their robotic skeleton and stuff. But yeah, I do like calling it punk rock Terminator, but at the same time, I get what you mean, because it doesn't give it enough credit, because it is more original than just say, oh, let's just rip off the Terminator, and because it's its own thing. I think it stands on its own. It's not just something that's derivative of Terminator. For one thing, it's we're presented with a very different, unique world, which is something I, again, can't really have to give credit to the movie. The movie's only like an hour and a half long, and he does a really great job of setting up this world and giving you a good picture and idea of what the world is like, even beyond the stuff that we see. You can just sort of imagine some of the other stuff, because I think they do such a good job of just some of the references they make and the way they talk. And yeah, I just am, considering it was a low budget film, I'm just all the more impressed by how professionally and well done it is to create this world.
I think it was pretty successful also.
Yeah. One of the things that definitely put him on the name. Yeah, It made almost $6 million at the box office, so that's quite good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what kind of release it got, like a very wide release or not. I'm not sure, but that's not bad. You know, for a
not at all. Definitely put him on the map, I'd say. What's funny is like it had a difficult release because originally the MPAA gave it an X rating.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what version I watched either. I may have watched the edited version.
I don't think I did. Mine seemed quite violent. And you can see sort of the difference. Even though, let's say, the Terminator has violence and was also rated R, and this movie is rated R, you can see why it's less mainstream in some ways. For instance, like explicit sex stuff, which is just always a big no-no over here. That's going to turn audiences way off, that it's going to have explicit sex stuff going on.
If violence is okay.
Violence is okay, but once you mix the sex in, you're really shocking and upsetting people. And what we're talking about is it's not just that it has a somewhat explicit sex scene, but it's also because the sex scene gets quite weird because there's a creepy stalker who's watching it, and you get to hear some of his like disgusting narration going on. He's saying some very, very crass things. We'll just say
the stuff he was saying was way worse than what was going on.
It was way worse. Yeah, definitely way worse. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can just see how that's like, okay, that's not going to fly in a sort of mainstream sense. A lot of people are just going to be turned right off by that. I was just like, it doesn't matter if he turns you off, though. It's all within context of a story, That's what I don't
laughing.
Get.
Oh, man, it took me out of the story because I was laughing so hard.
Yeah, that's true. It's a weird little sidebar to the main plot, but it fits in well enough. Like when I first was watching, I thought it was going to have a bigger part of the plot, but it doesn't really. It's just kind of there, which is fine. I don't mind.
Lincoln, right? Is that who that was?
Yeah, it's Lincoln. Yeah.
Who was apparently the guy that installed all the security systems in the building and knew all the best ways to spy on the.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's a big old perv. And as they always do in these movies, whenever you have somebody that's like a perv, they're always really like physically repulsive too. Like he's not some normal looking guy. He's like kind of fat, and he's got like he's an unattractive guy, and I'm sure they play it up with his face and his thin lips. And there's always these close-ups on his mouth while he's talking and stuff. It's like just to make you feel like even more gross while he's saying like sexual things and stuff. And why has he got like those latex gloves on his hand? He looks all. They do whatever they like. They're just like let's make him creepy and repulsive as fuck. We'll go full on there.
Well, and he's hitting on her the entire time, or I guess you could call it hitting on, whatever's more aggressive than that. I guess aggressive hitting on her. And
what's funny is how normal he starts out, because and this is poetic license. This is fiction and stuff, and I'm sure there are exceptions in real life, but I've watched enough of those crime shows and stuff about various sex criminals and stuff like that, rapists and whatever you. And in real life, it's usually the case that like when you have these types of people that like that's their thing, it's kind of obvious because they're actually very bad and awkward at talking to people. Like even having like a normal conversation. Like, even if they don't say anything too awful, they'll often strike people as, like, there's something off about them, something weird. Mm-hmm. This guy's really good. Like, at first, he's really normal and personable. He just switches on his own.
Yeah.
Like, he just decides to go for it at one point. Because at first, he's just completely normal. He's very personable. He's easy to talk to. There's no reason he's giving off any sort of creepy vibe. Then he just switches it on voluntarily. He's just like, okay, time to go for it. And then he starts, hitting on her and saying suggestive things and stuff. But, I kind of enjoyed that, how he just at first he's very normal.
Yeah.
Even though we've already seen him and we know what he's like, he's actually doing a very good job of acting normal. I love when he's singing that song. He's just like, I just made it's so random because he's just like, how about I sing? Like she's already saying that she's annoyed by him, and he's just like, I know, I'll sing a song. Then he sings some weird nonsense song. And then he very proudly says, I made that up. And I was just like, thank God, because that's a real song. That's weird. But yeah.
It's like Bow-Legged Girls or something like that.
Something like, what is it? Like the blippity bloppity glippity, something like that. So it's really odd, which is good if it's the character completely.
Yeah, totally.
But the movie opens with a Bible quote, one of the part was, what was it like? It's like no flesh shall be spared, from the book of Luke, chapter 13, and that's tied into what the actual make of the robot is. The robot is known as the Mark 13. Because the whole thing is when he takes it back to his girlfriend, who is some sort of outsider artist type that likes to like make metal sculptures and stuff like that. He says, "Oh, I think it's what is it?" He says, "I think it's like some sort of service droid, some sort of maintenance droid, stuff like that." And it turns out it's not. It's actually some sort of killer robot that they're very horrible, because this is one of those cyberpunk futures. So there's a horrible oppressive government. You better believe it. And one of the points of the movies, they're talking about how there's going to, like, they want to institute population control.
Right.
And what we gradually find out over the course of the movie by the end is that the Mark 13 is their newest solution to that. It's like, okay, we've tried injecting people with drugs. We've tried making laws against procreation, stuff like that. Now we're just going to make a whole line of robots that kill people, which is really awesome. I love it because there's some logic stuff in the movie that you might question, but if you really play it out and think about it in the context of the movie, it makes sense. Because you'd be like, okay, so this robot, part of what it does, like one of its most special weapons, is it injects you with some sort of like weird drug that's like hallucinogenic and makes you, well, redundant, makes you hallucinate and picture really weird things. It's like, why does a robot need to do that? Why doesn't it just kill you? But part of the thing is, like, they want to spread terror. The idea that this, it's not just that people die, but they're like going mad and with fear and stuff. Because once it injects you with this stuff, you go crazy with fear, which I really like. It's a different layer. You don't see that in other killer robots. Most of them, they're just efficient killers. And the other thing too, and one of the reasons why the movie lasts as long as it does, is because, well, the whole point of this is the robot has already been busted down and broken. But part of its programming is that it can reassemble itself using whatever it finds. So this is not like the robot as it comes off the line. This is the robot destroyed, basically, in pieces and reconstituting itself using whatever it finds in the apartment, like putting itself together with appliances and stuff like that, which is why it's kind of clunky and... I would imagine the original model probably can move around better and stuff, whereas this thing's kind of slow. Did you read that bit in the Wikipedia where, like, one of the critics that didn't like it got really mad about it and said it was as if someone had remade Alien with the monster played by a rustier Richter set?
Oh, I
don't agree with that, but it's funny.
Oh, yeah, he's got to get his blurb somewhere.
Oh, exactly right.
This is supposed to take place in the year 2000.
Oh, did they actually put it in that year?
I mean, that's what the trivia says. I never saw anything that specifically said that, but if that's the case, man,
the movie came out in 1990. For Christ's sake.
We've got a lot going on in 10 years.
Yeah. Wow. No, I didn't know that. That went right by me, if that's stated. Part of it was the headspace, because I was already watching it, thinking of it in the context of Dredd, which is pretty far in the future. So I was just like, yeah, this is part of the Dredd universe. But to think that it's in the year 2000. If the movie was made in 1960, you'd be like, okay, but no, 1990. That's messed up.
Well, you've got to think, okay, the nukes are going to drop like yesterday, and then the day it was released, and that's a stretch.
So we get some, also to give us an idea of what's going on in the world, we get some narration from radio DJ.
Iggy Pop.
Played by Iggy Pop, we never see him in the movie, we just hear his voice, and I would never have known that was him. He does a pretty good job of putting on the whole, hey, I'm a DJ, what's going on type voice. Props to Iggy Pop, which also adds to some of the punk rock reputation this movie has. And of course, Lemmy from Motorhead makes a very clunky cameo where he plays a cabbie talking about the world, and then he basically introduces them to a Motorhead song. Yeah, it's like, yeah, you like music, which is a great question.
Wonder if that was part of his cameo.
Even in a post-apocalyptic world, it's a stupid question to ask people if you like music. No, I'm like the one person in the world that doesn't like music. Any music. All music is terrible to me. It was like, anyway, you like music? Check these guys out. And then you're like Motorhead playing. Like, well, that's pretty on the nose, Lemmy, but sure, whatever.
Yeah.
He's a good cameo though, because he's got, you know, he's always been a rough-looking guy. He fits into that sort of landscape pretty well. When you think about like all like the groupie sex he had, you're like, wow, he's like such an ugly motherfucker. He has like a wart on his face. It's, wow.
He did until the day he died.
Yeah, that's right. He did die a few years ago.
Yeah. It got bigger and bigger and hairier and nastier throughout the years.
Like Ron Jeremy.
Robert De Niro. More cancerous.
Yeah.
I think Robert De Niro's had his lopped off quite a few times, but it keeps coming back.
Oh, gross.
But yeah, this film, I don't know if you felt this way, but I'm, you know, and it was showing all the you know, the actual robot stuff. I was thinking a lot of Tetsuo. I don't know if you've ever seen Tetsuo the Iron Man.
Yeah, I've seen it.
It came out in I had to look it up. It came out in '89. You know, this film was made in '90. I didn't know if maybe some of that.
Yeah, I don't know if that one specifically, but I don't think it would be a reach to say there was probably at least some like mecha style anime that probably influenced some of the look of this movie, some of the stuff. One of the things that I think comes from Blade Runner, and it's funny because Blade Runner is such a massive thing that like no movie can get away from it, which is almost turned into a bad thing because it's like nobody even tries anything original. It's just like, well, just do the Blade Runner thing, you know, which it gets kind of old. Sure. But like one of like the less obvious things in Blade Runner is about the people, and we talked about this before. I can't remember exactly how we got into the subject when we were talking about how back in the 80s there was sort of like a weird false start where people presupposed the future was when Japan's economy was booming in the 80s, and people were just like, in the future, Japan's going to take over the world and stuff. And you see a bit of that even in Blade Runner, even though it's not specifically Japanese, but it's various Asians. And this movie's the same thing. It's just like, in the future, we're all going to have Asians living right on top of us. Where in this one, Asians underneath us. Like, I know that was really important. Like, that wasn't random. They were like, get an Asian lady and a whole bunch of Asian people and put them in that apartment because we need that aesthetic. Like, you just know it. Like, because that's part of this whole future world is Asians are going to be all over us, which is kind of happening, I guess, to a certain degree. But
I thought it was kind of odd because she keeps hitting it's the stereotypical loud neighbor thing, or asshole neighbor hitting it with a broom or whatever. But man, those floors look really solid because she was up there doing like metal work and like all sorts of things you would not be able to do in an apartment, like standing on metal and doing elaborate things.
So that is to let people know, that is Jill. Jill is the girlfriend of our main character, Mo. Mo is he used to be a soldier, I guess, of some sort. He was in the Corps or whatever it was, but now he's like a professional scavenger that goes around and stuff. He's got
space marine or some shit is what they call him.
Yeah, and he apparently been in space, and he talked about how it was much better up there. But which is another thing that's kind of relatable to Blade Runner too, whereas like Blade Runner, it's like Earth's just a shithole and all the best stuff is like off planet. And it's actually done in a movie I hate, but they do the same thing. In fact, a lot of people say that you could make an argument this movie takes place in the same universe as Blade Runner, and that is the 1998 Kurt Russell film Soldier. I hate that movie with everything I have. I hate it so much, but there's even absolute nods to it. Like at one point when he's walking past a bunch of like garbage, there's like one of those flying machines from Blade Runner like in there, so they make a direct nod to it. But that movie has that kind of thing going on too, where it's just like, yeah, it's better to be off planet because Earth is just garbage now. But so anyway, so Jill is the girlfriend of our main character, Mo, or Moses Matt Baxter. He's got a sidekick, Shades, the very British Shades, kind of uninspired. His name is Shades. He wears shades. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Mo is played, I believe, by Dylan McDermott, which came from the urging of the studio that wanted to tone down the Britishness of the movie and get some Americans in there. So okay, that's fine, I guess. But so Jill, while they roam about, and he actually ventures out into the zone, which I guess implied. Not a lot of people do that because it's dangerous, radiation, blah blah blah. They let us know that Jill is kind of a recluse. Like she never really leaves her. She lives in a really big apartment complex, which is fitting with the whole Judge Dredd thing, because that's how most people do live in the Judge Dredd world. They live in big, huge, massive complexes in the cities, and she's in there, and it's implied. I think it's stated that she hasn't even been outside in like maybe 2 years or something like that. I can't remember exactly how long, but like she just never leaves, and it's a high security building. And she's really paranoid about the outside world. She's been paranoid when he comes back. Like he's been gone, and he's coming back to see her, and at first she doesn't even want to let them in, even though it's her boyfriend. And she like scans. I guess she's paranoid about radiation, because she like scans them for radiation. Is the main thing, right? She uses something to make sure they don't have any. When
you think about it, the majority of the film takes place in that apartment too.
Yeah, the whole second half of the film is in that apartment.
I mean, relatively. I think that's the you see the low budget aspect of it there. But,
sure,
but I think it works. I mean,
it does work. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of like what I felt about, although it's unrelated except for the connections I've made, like the new Judge Dredd movie, which I liked about. I liked the new Judge Dredd movie a lot, and I felt bad that it bombed because the sequel would have been good. Yeah. Was like that movie was great, but it was kind of too bad that it didn't show you enough of the city. Like you only got one really little quick like car chase scene, and then the rest was in that building. This movie is kind of the same thing. Like it works for what it is, but you do feel kind of bad. You're like, I wish I could have seen a bit more of the world. Seen a bit more of the city. All we get is somebody going through the zone in the desert, then some very quick scenes of coming into the city, them taking the water taxi that Lemmy drives. Like this city has a bunch of canals in it, which I think is kind of cool, differentiates it a little bit. And then basically we're in her apartment complex, which they say has like a lot of security, and there's a big security team, although they seem to be a bunch of idiots that don't know what they're doing.
With shoulder pads. They have shoulder pads on.
They're really ineffective. But I can't help but I view the movie in the context of Dredd, and I just think, yeah, this is one of the places that's like so like far in. It's either really far in or it's really like on the edge. Maybe it's on the edge because it didn't seem far, but like the judges just don't get there. It's just like, there's no judges. You have to rely on these idiots. Is kind of how I feel. But yeah, so you've got Jill, and she lets him in, and yeah, what kicks off the whole plot is what the difference is, okay, when he sells the stuff to the dealer, okay, so I'll back up because in case I've confused people. So what happens is the mysterious junk dealer is the guy who actually brings it in and salvages it. He doesn't deal with the junk shop guy who's off in the bathroom or something like that. He deals with Mo, who very quickly is very interested and buys it himself. The other guy doesn't give him much argument. He leaves. Mo then flips it to the dealer, except he keeps one part. He keeps the head, and it's the head he gives to Jill because he knows that Jill has an affinity for these types of things. Right. And she does really like it. She's like, oh, it's horrible. I love it, or something like that. And she really likes it, and she is very excited to use it in her art right away. And what's cool is, so you've got how the robot, even without its head, and it's in various pieces back at the dealer's place, and the dealer knows that it's an interesting find too, and he's trying to look up what it is. He looks up in some database to find out what it is. And of course, just as he's finding out that this is actually a very lethal robot, and it's a lethal robot that is capable of reassembling itself, it kills him. So it's kind of cool. So what you have is she just has the head, and then the body putting it together, and then making the journey to her to reunite with its head, which is pretty cool. That's different from Terminator. I think that's something that gives the film, something unique about it. And of course, this is a prototype of the Mark 13. Mm-hmm. Spoilers, but that's the movie ends on basically a big downer note because we go back to our Greek chorus or whatever you want to call it. We go back to Iggy Pop talking. He's just like, hey, guess what? The government has okayed mass production of the Mark 13. He's like, and that's awesome because that'll give you guys jobs. So go out and go out to the factories. You'll make these. And of course, the thing knowing that like the whole reason the government is making these is like to use them to like murder citizens to keep the population down. That's the big downer ending.
Yeah. It's what do you think about the guy that plays the junk dealer?
He was dubbed, right?
That's what I was going to say. I don't understand what was going on.
That was definitely not his voice, and it doesn't sync up.
I didn't notice anyone else being dubbed in the film, but I mean, even the sounds were dubbed when he was on screen.
Yeah, so all I can think is like they just really wanted a really specific look, and maybe he had like I don't know what nationality he was. Maybe he had a really weird accent or something. Or all I can think is like they wanted that look, but for whatever reason his lines didn't work, so they had to dub it with somebody else. Because yeah, the sound changes anytime the camera's on him. Like you said, it's not even just his dialogue. It's like he's on a completely separate audio track, which is really odd and is kind of a gripe I have of the film, because it does seem a little weird and I don't want to say unprofessional, but it's a little weird and distracting.
Yeah, I think it kind of adds to the cyberpunk charm it has.
Sure. That's Alvy.
Alvy, okay. I was trying to find his name.
Yeah. He's an interesting character. I mean, it's unfortunate he dies, and he has a pretty cool death where, like, as he's just looking it up, like, one of the little hand things, or claw, or whatever you want to call it, that has, like, the syringe, you know, sort of runs up to him and injects him. And that's the other thing, is when you have a few of these characters getting injected, we get to see some of, like, their weird hallucinations before they die. Which, actually factors pretty well into the plot, because it basically is how Jill manages to destroy it. Because it's like she gets like a replay of the stuff that Mo was babbling before he died. Spoilers, our big hero dies.
Yeah.
Did you think she was dead? Because I thought she was dead.
Yeah, I thought she was dead at one point, for sure.
Because, okay, so after we're skipping ahead and we'll move around, but I mean, the whole thing is eventually Alvy, shortly before Alvy dies, while Alvy is doing research on this and he's finding out it's interesting, he calls Mo saying, hey, I want you to come over and we're going to talk about this. This is really big. And this is a bit of plot, what you might call plot-induced stupidity, in that he already suspected it was dangerous, and he doesn't say anything like, bring Jill with you, or get the thing out of there. Like, he doesn't give him any warning. He just says, oh, you got to come here. And okay, whatever, you have to move the plot forward. So by the time he gets there, he's dead. But, crap, I derailed myself. What was I going to say before that? Wait, it was something about the plot.
Well, while he's gone, that's when it comes alive and kills Lincoln.
Right. Yeah, so he gets there to find Lincoln dead. Yeah, so he's rushing back. Okay, so to set up what we were talking about here, he's rushing back to help Jill, and we have this whole thing where Jill is alone in the apartment with it as it revives, and it starts, you know, trying to kill her, and the place gets locked down, so she can't get out of there. And eventually, her crazy stalker guy sees this as doesn't know what's going on, but just knows something's going on. Sees this as an opportunity to like actually go and talk to her. And even though she's telling him that that she locked a killer robot in the next room, he's too focused on her. He doesn't give a shit. He's just like, oh yeah, that's fine. And stuff. So eventually what happens, of course, is he gets the death we all are waiting him to see.
Right. And
by the time Mo gets there, he's sort of just in time to try to help her fight it off. But at one point, she and the robot go out this window, and she's several floors up, you know, the few stories up, and she's hanging off this wire. And the wire gets cut, and she swings, and she crashes through the window of the apartment below her, and she's just laying splayed out on the floor. I was sure she was dead. I thought she was dead. I thought, oh, okay, now the rest of the movie is going to be Mo taking his, you know, going crazy and taking his revenge out on that. And the reverse happens. She gets up, she's okay, and she goes to fight, and by the time she gets to Mo, he's lost the fight and is dead. Like, that threw me off. I mean, it's not bad, I mean, but yeah, I completely misread that. I thought she was dead. And it would all be about Mo going after, you know, for revenge.
Well, yeah, after Lincoln gets killed, Mo shows up with the completely inept security guards, and they just proceed to... She just kind of just, like, falls down, and they just proceed to shoot this thing with, like, a whole lot of weapons, and...
Don't you love how, like, when it's chasing her, and she's, oh, it's gonna kill her, and then you have the moment where the big damn heroes moment where he comes, and he's got the security team, and they've all got guns. What does he say? He says, Jill! Wouldn't you say get down?
Well, it's almost like they're going to shoot regardless of whether or not she gets out of the way or not. Like
luckily she does drop. And they start to blow the thing away. But I would not yell Jill. That would not be the right thing to do. You'd have to be like, get down, no, down. Like, I mean, yes, then people can make me even more Terminator comparisons as if they invented the words get down.
Yeah. Come with me if you want to live.
And get down while you're at it, because I'll be back.
Yeah, exactly.
Baby.
Hasta la vista, Jill.
I have to say, I don't know the actress that played Jill, but at first she had a lot of that weird 80s-ness to her that keeps me from being attracted to women from that era. But I have to say, even though it's been done in a lot of movies, it really won me over. The whole thing where you have a female lead or protagonist and she's in some sort of dangerous situation, and she has to fight her way through, and as time goes on she gets bloodied up and messed up. I have to say, by the end of the movie I was very attracted to her. I thought that worked really well when she's all bloodied up and stuff. I liked that.
Yeah, this is
there's some really good shots of it. Sorry?
Stacey Travis.
Okay. I'm sure I've probably seen her in a couple other things.
Has done tons of things, just nothing I really could point out and say.
Our first movie is Phantasm 2.
Okay.
Phantasm 2, Earth Girls Are Easy, and a bunch of stuff I don't know. She was in the 1999 film Mystery Men. Wow, that's a weird one. Traffic. Wow, she's in Ghost World. I don't remember that. Of course, I'm really bad with faces and stuff. Yeah, she's all over the place, just not in big movies. Like, apparently she's in Easy A, which I've seen. She's in...
I think she played the mom in Easy A is probably why.
Yeah.
But she dyed her hair red for this. So
she's in A Christmas Story too, so there's no forgiveness for her.
Christmas... Oh, I haven't even seen that.
Never, ever, ever, ever see that. I mean, if you want to make a list of like sequels that completely fall short and destroy the original, Christmas Story 2.
It's 2012. Wow, they waited a little while.
Yeah, it's
the Bob Clark film, man.
Yeah, yes, like that it ever happened is a huge insult.
Oh, Daniel Stern. Yeah, I have heard of that.
It's even worse than you could imagine. I promise.
Even
worse. Like, I mean, you would expect it to be bad, but it's so bad.
You're selling it so well, though.
I promise. Like, I really like A Christmas Story, but I'm not in that upper tier of people that love it and think it's like one of the greatest things ever. Like, I like A Christmas Story. I like it a lot, but even I like that. Like, the sequel to it is just offensive to me. It's so bad. Like, it offends me that they would do it. And it's such a stupid thing. It's about Ralphie when he's like 16 and stuff, and yeah, it's Daniel Stern as the father.
Have you seen National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation too?
No, I'm aware of it though.
Yeah, watch that as well.
Maybe is that set? Yeah, that's a possibility, people.
No, it is awful.
Yeah, probably the same level of awful of this. Yeah, it's so bad. Yeah, you got Daniel Stern playing the father. And him making like no attempt to even try to be the same as Gavin MacLeod or whatever that guy's name was.
Oh, that guy was great.
That guy was great. Like, on the one hand, you could say, I guess it's good that he's not trying to just copy the performance. But on the other hand, it's just like, okay, his father just aged into a completely different person. And I don't mean looks, because I mean that's how they go when they recast. I mean completely different character. Like, in no way. And like they just over the top. Like, all the stuff that was over the top in the original was... it was playful and done. The whole thing was over the top in this. And his father's like a raving lunatic. More or less. And you know how like he had like 3 or 4 brief little fantasies in the movie in the original where he would imagine some things, but they didn't last that long. Like the longest one might have been like, oh, we're shooting Black Bart or whatever. That maybe a minute and a half. This movie has like at least 5 or 6 of them, and they're way longer. And it's a little more concerning because now he's like 16, and yet he's having these big, long, elaborate fantasies. The whole thing is he wants to buy a car because he wants to impress a girl, of course. And like he just keeps having like really weird fantasies about her. Like it's right up there with fucking Sidekicks.
Wow!
Remember Jonathan Brandis's really disturbed character that keeps having elaborate fantasies? It's like almost that bad. I'm going to say almost because Chuck Norris is not involved, but...
Look, I have asthma and a really good imagination.
Love my hot Asian teacher.
Oh, man. Wow. But Stacey Travis dyed her hair red in this film, so that's probably why I don't recognize her.
Yeah.
From
she's a convincing redhead. I'd believe it.
Sure.
course. I don't know.
You know, the lighting is kind of odd too. It's like kind of, it's almost like ambient lighting for most of the film. So it's, you know, not exactly, you know, showing you what she actually looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this movie's full of like, shadows and darkness.
It looks great. I mean, I think that's,
which looks really good. I mean, like a black and white cut would look great.
Yeah,
I think.
I think Richard Stanley is a great visual director. He really has a good eye for things. This and Dust Devil as well.
Yeah, I want to see that now too. I haven't seen that either. You know.
Yeah.
I know the critics were a little harder on that one, but it sounds really cool.
Well, check it out. Let me know what you think. I think it's one of the movies that it sounds really, really, you know, interesting, but it maybe is a little boring.
Yeah, I heard it's a little more style over substance type movie, trying to make, you know, some more philosophical points than necessarily tell a coherent story, which works sometimes. But yeah, it's the type of thing that has potential to backfire horribly.
I would almost say this film is almost guilty of that as well, but I think it maybe pulls it off a little bit better than Dust Devil does. But you know, the visual style it's kind of the same criticisms I have.
I mean,
you know,
to me that makes me really want to see it. Yeah,
a few other directors, you know, they're really focused on the visual aspects, but you know, the film itself just doesn't play that well.
I mean, this movie isn't without its, I guess, themes and stuff. They're not that important. Some of it has to do with him being from South Africa, you know, and growing up in a world where apartheid was a thing, and so it's not at all a stretch for him to make a movie that has like a horrible, oppressive government trying to control the population and stuff. So yeah, and there's a thing here I'm reading where he's like making a point saying, you know, about how the robot isn't actually evil. It doesn't know it's committing evil. It's just obeying its programming, which is kind of like what sometimes people do in those situations. Like you could say, like the Nazis did during World War II, or at least some of them, not all of them, but you know, like some of them just really didn't think about what they were doing. They're like, well, I'm following orders, type thing. Not to make excuses for that. Well, Nazis being a very hot topic these days.
For some reason, yeah.
Yeah, I know. But trying to get back into so there's some funny moments in the movie too, like when Max finds, or Moses finds man, I keep forgetting all the names, Alvy dead, and before he can rush back, he does the sensible thing. He tries to call somebody that's closer to her, and he calls Shades. And Shades is tripping balls on like some kind of acid he just took, which is funny. So it's just like it's pretty funny. He's trying to tell him this stuff, and he's just like going on like this weird, you know, drug-induced tangent. And what's great is he winds up being kind of the big hero in the movie, and yet it's still played that like he's still kind of high, like he's still just sort of coming down. It's really great. I really enjoy that. It's pretty funny. Because he's the one that winds up saving Jill in the end, because, of course, Mo is dead. So Jill has this whole thing where she's still trying to finish this thing off, and it just won't die, which is pretty similar to the Terminator and a lot of robot-type movies, sure. But the thing is, the defect in this model, this being a prototype, is that moisture makes it more vulnerable, I guess. And she winds up luring it into the shower and turning it on. And while it's in there, that's where Shades actually gives it the final blow, shooting it a few times.
Yeah.
Even though he's still, like I said, he's still kind of high. Because at one point, he's actually like holding the gun to it. And he doesn't even do anything. He's just like, shoot it.
Yeah, it was a bit of a delayed reaction there.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mo calls him at one point, and he's just like, he says, my heart is like an alligator at one point, and I think that's a
Fear and Loathing reference.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man,
you can definitely see why somebody like Richard Stanley would be like a fan of Hunter Thompson.
Hunter Thompson, yeah, I couldn't think of his name. Yeah, I thought I remembered that quote from somewhere.
I really love the Fear and Loathing movie, but I bet you Richard Stanley could have done a good Fear and Loathing movie too.
Sure.
Who
directed that?
Terry Gilliam of all people, who I love. I love Terry Gilliam, and he does a great job. But Yeah, I think Richard Stanley could have done it too. And as we said, it's just sort of unfortunate what happened with the whole thing, because maybe he could have done some, big mainstream, big budget movies, and he's still around. He still does stuff, but he just seems more or less content. Like, he seems so easygoing when he's in that documentary talking about it. Like, he doesn't seem to hold any sort of grudge or bitterness over it, where I'm just thinking, man, you could be like a big household name now.
I totally get it, though, because, I mean, he probably considers himself an artist, and you really have to compromise a lot of your, ideals when you join the Hollywood system, I guess. Because, like,
very much so.
I almost think of, like, Gareth Edwards, and his experience on this newest Star Wars film, which I'd love to hear his side of that story. But, I hope it hasn't ruined him as a director forever, because, I can imagine that the Disney formula will do that to a lot of people, up and coming.
I mean, he hasn't done a full-length feature film since.
No.
He's just done, like, shorts. He did an anthology thing. He did a documentary in 2012. And, then he just showed up in a few documentaries, including Lost Soul, The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau. And, I don't know. I want somebody to give this man a shot.
Yeah, just like, here's, a couple $1,000,000, make a cool movie. I just don't...
Because we're talking... One thing we talk about a lot here, and when we're on, like, the other show, Sausage Factory stuff, it's like... We're living in a world now that's, screaming for some originality in movies instead of just, how cookie cutter so many movies have come. And here's a guy that's been making original movies since basically then, and yet he's been sort of cut off from it.
I don't get it. And I don't get why there's not more. I don't understand why it's got to be these huge, massive, $500 million projects that have to turn a profit of $1 billion, before it's successful.
I mean, I understand that this is all about profits and greed, but it starts to stretch credibility, where it's just like, okay, every single movie has to be this massive box office phenomenon. Like, that's not sustainable or possible or realistic in any way. So what are you thinking? Like, studios, I mean, I get it. Whenever you're in this business, you gotta look for the next big thing. But you have to look for the stuff in between too,
Do you remember, like, in the early 90s when all the studios were getting an independent, division? And, they'd throw a few $1,000,000 in there, and they'd put out some decent movies, and sometimes they were successful, sometimes not. But, a lot of great stuff came from that.
That's the right way to do things.
I don't know why more people aren't doing that. I mean, you don't have to spend this ridiculous amount of money to get a good movie.
I mean, what have we learned about low-budget filmmaking the last 15 years? It's, you can do a found footage. And that's it. That's it. If it's a low-budget movie nowadays, it's found footage. And I realize I have a certain amount of bias against that, which is, bias. So I won't speak too harshly, because there have been some good found footage movies over the years. Yes. But yeah, I don't think that should be where low budget starts and ends. But nowadays, it's just like, it's a low-budget film, so it's obviously found footage, regardless of what it's supposed to be about. It's just like, the original treatment was going to be this sci-fi type thing crossed with a Western, and then we turned it into a low-budget horror movie. Okay.
Just, I think of stuff like, Fox Searchlight, when studios were coming out with, it seems like all the big studios had their little independent studio, which I think they've all gone, by the wayside now, but, and they put out a lot of great stuff, 20 years ago.
Sucks. Well, Fox Searchlight's still around and has produced some. Okay. I mean, Birdman, a movie I know you're not that high on. Birdman was that. Slumdog Millionaire was one.
Okay.
So it's still around.
I bet Slumdog Millionaire had a big budget, though.
Basically think of something quirky of the last 15 years, and it's probably Fox Searchlight, Little Miss Sunshine, Juno.
Yeah, I like all these
Beasts of the Southern Wild. The Grand Budapest Hotel, Brooklyn.
It's a great movie.
Yeah, so, I mean, those are quite a few pretty good movies. So, at least Fox Searchlight is still around. I know what you mean, though. Some of the others don't exist anymore. But it proves, that sort of stuff can still happen. But, yeah, like, why couldn't they take a look at somebody like Richard Stanley? I mean, I don't mean to be some like person in 2017 that's just like, oh, I just watched Hardware, and now like this guy that's been in movies forever. I think you need to, but I mean, whatever it takes. This guy has more to offer. Hardware is not a masterpiece by any stretch of the meaning. It's basically a cult film, but it's a really great example of what you can do with a low budget, and it has a lot of really unique, memorable traits that make it a pretty enjoyable movie. I think before the show we were discussing the soundtrack. The soundtrack is really well thought out and fits in very well to this sort of cyberpunk world. And I know when you think of something like cyberpunk, it's like, well, that's pretty on the nose. Just give it some sort of like techno type music. But no, there's layers to it, because the main difference is, I mean, and here's the way I like my sci-fi type things is sort of a clean and dirty. And I'm always a fan of the dirty. I want Blade Runner. I want Dark City. I want that kind of stuff. Whereas the clean, pristine stuff of the Star Trek, Minority Report, those clean, pristine futures, they're good too. You need that too, but it doesn't appeal to me as much. The really nice future society where everything's clean and nice and technology is all touchscreen and wonderful. I like the clunky, dirty analog thing that's in this. When it's done right, it's one of my favorite things, as I've said, whether it's a comic book or a novel or a movie, video game, whatever. I really like it. And then you get crossovers into other things too, like a steampunk or whatever. Seeing this movie, you know what this makes me want to see, even though it's completely unrelated? And I know it's a movie we actually did talk about doing, because we talked about the filmmaker, is City of Lost Children.
I love that film.
Yeah, I love that film too. So I think we'll probably do that at some point in the future, because we're both big fans of it, and I haven't seen it in forever, man. It's been a long time since I've seen it.
Oh, that's
so I'd really like an excuse to talk about that sometime.
I'm trying to think of the director's name. It's the same guy that did Amelie, right?
Yeah.
Jean Lejean or something like that?
The Genet?
Yeah, that's it. Genet.
Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Yeah, Jeunet. Good old Jean-Pierre Jeunet.
Yeah, I like virtually everything.
Who randomly directed Alien Resurrection, which is so odd.
It's so perfectly his directing style, though. It's amazing how much.
That's true. If you're familiar with his other work and stuff, and then you watch Alien Resurrection, you see exactly how it fits in. That's why I'm an apologist.
Yeah, I'm an apologist for that film. I understand what it is. In that world, it does not work. I don't like it very much at all, but I still say it's better than Part 3.
Which has some similar things in that Fincher, very respected director, wasn't able to really bring across his vision. The movie went through a lot of turmoil and stuff, and there are apologists for that movie too. I know some people say like there's some sort of work print or other cut that makes it better, supposedly, that I still haven't seen, even though I was going to see it like 3 years ago.
It's on the special edition they put out a few years ago.
Yeah, I still don't even own the Alien movies on Blu-ray, which is kind of a crime. I still just have my DVDs of the Alien movies. I'll have to correct that, because they're actually worth getting again.
Sure,
those ones, not.
Yeah, I got the. I think it's just the quadrology. They re-released the quadrology.
Yeah,
with some of the.
And I've seen that for fairly good prices, so I can't even say that it's too expensive or anything like that.
Yeah, it's good. I like it. It's one of my favorite franchises of all time. Most of the movies in the franchise I don't like, so it's kind of odd.
Because it's more just like how good the first couple are, the great world it suggests, but every time somebody tries to do something else with the world, they fail. I mean, that was one of the big failures. I mean, there were a lot of problems, obviously, with the recent one, Covenant, but it didn't even feel connected, really. It didn't feel like the Alien world to me.
No. Which is why I think if it had been a Prometheus film, I wouldn't have hated it nearly as much.
Well, it is directly linked to Prometheus.
Right, but it's almost like, I know I've said all this stuff before, but it's like Ridley Scott was like just trying to show the haters of Prometheus. He's like, fuck you then. I will make it directly related to the Alien franchise now. You know.
Yeah, it would have been better if Prometheus was a separate thing from Alien for sure.
That's why I didn't dislike Prometheus at all, because
I still enjoy Prometheus for, you know, it's not amazing.
I think it's a much better film than Covenant anyway, but
it's better than Covenant. It's absolutely better than Covenant.
You know, I had them completely separated in my mind, and
well, now you can't.
No, now you can't.
It's the same character, and yeah.
My notes here is like music, ministry, shoulder pads.
Yeah,
I was just writing down funny things. That it's you know, I love that just adding shoulder pads in there.
Yeah. What's great about the violence in this movie too is how it can take you by surprise, because it has, for a short movie, for an hour and a half movie, it actually has a fairly long lead up. It takes about 45 minutes before the robot is up and going. And I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying it's interesting because usually when you have movies with graphic violence, they get it in there early so you know what to expect. So this movie could probably surprise certain people seeing it for the first time, because you'll have pretty much no violence. And then when the violence hits, it is very graphic. I mean, you have that whole security team, basically getting cut in half by the doors. The guy that was really nice to her, remember the black guy that he talked to her and was trying to, he does a horrible death with blood spurting like it's some sort of anime.
Yeah.
He gets cut in half by the doors and blood's just going like this fountain. It's pretty horrific, because he's kind of a comedic character up to that point, and then he just dies this really brutal graphic death.
Yeah, I like that kill a lot.
Yeah.
But Dylan McDermott, you know, went on to be a pretty big actor. Did The Practice for quite a while, 10 years he did The Practice, which I didn't really watch a whole lot of.
No. I know the title.
It was a successful show. I mean, obviously if it ran that long.
Yeah, I know his name. I know he's in stuff, but I couldn't really pick him out or anything like that. He's too similar to what's that other guy? There's another guy with his name backwards. This is Dylan McDermott. Oh, Dermot Mulrooney.
Oh, okay.
I mix them up a lot.
I look up who that is.
Just another sort of mid-range guy that's in stuff. I
don't know. Joe America. Just random generic guy.
What's weird is if you look up Richard Stanley's article on Wikipedia, it's not very long, but it says nothing about Island of Dr. Moreau. It literally says Stanley's next project was the third major movie version of the H.G. Wells novel The Island of Dr. Moreau for New Line Cinema in 1996. Then it just jumps ahead to other stuff he did. It doesn't say that he was fired. It does nothing.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I didn't know that he had anything to do with that film until, shortly before this documentary came out. I don't know
how long I knew. I didn't know exactly who he was. I just had known for quite a few years before the documentary that there had been a director who was fired. I did know that. I didn't know him or the stuff he'd done, but yeah, I knew for quite a few years, even before I saw the documentary, that the movie was kind of a mess and that a director had been fired. I knew that from somewhere.
There's some really interesting. I know I did see some sketches that are really disturbing from just some artwork that he had done
for Dr. Moreau.
Yeah, for Dr. Moreau, and they're just
cool.
half human, half beast. Things strapped to a table. I'm looking at one image here that I had seen, when they were doing the marketing for this documentary.
Yeah, he collaborated with Stan Winston on it. Which is another thing I want to point out about this movie Hardware is there's no Stan Winston in this movie. It's all sort of unknown, low budget stuff, and they do a great job. The artistic aesthetic is really good. So whoever the art director or whatever you want to say. Like, props to them. They get a really good look. It's sort of uniform throughout the film. The film doesn't feel like it's in different places or anything like it. It's not uneven. There's a solidarity to it, and even though they didn't have much stuff. Again, the low budget works in a way because it shows some of the crap sack world. Like we said, this inept security force without their football shoulder pads. They look so, they look so cheap and under equipped.
Well, when it first introduces those guys, they're playing chess.
Yeah, that's right.
And one of the guys, I think the guy must be African, or he has some sort of an accent. The older guy.
Yeah.
And he's teaching him about a Sicilian chess move. I think it is. It's where you have to sacrifice one of your pieces, and he says that's what you use when you play robots because they don't understand the idea of sacrifice.
Sure.
So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yep. Little commentary, commentary there on that sort of thing. But what's interesting is Stanley's weird connection to the island of Dr. Moreau, because he had an ancestor. Remember, he's from South Africa. He had an ancestor who was the basis for one of the characters in the not in the Island of Dr. Moreau, but in the story Heart of Darkness, right? So that's Joseph Conrad. Mm-hmm. Heart of Darkness was the main inspiration for the film Apocalypse Now, which also had Brando, who's in both movies, which is kind of cool.
Okay, yeah.
And it says that, like, apparently Brando really liked Stanley's vision for that film, which is weird. Like, in case people were wondering who haven't seen it and thought, like, one of the things that got him off the film was, like, Brando was being difficult with him. Brando was being weird and stuff, but that wasn't really the issue. It wasn't like they clashed. Brando actually was kind of enthusiastic about making the movie because he liked Stanley's ideas. So,
watching that movie, Brando cracks me up so much because a lot of those odd, weird things that he does were just stuff he decided to do. Like, it was his idea to paint himself white, and all this. Yeah. And a lot of his dialogue is even like ad-libbed. Yeah. At his request, he's like, I'm not going to remember my lines. I'm just going to say some shit.
Yeah, he was never good at that, even in his prime. No. So it's just like, yeah.
You can imagine by this point.
That's what it is to be somebody like. That's what it is to be like somebody like Brando. Like, most people think of acting as, okay, you have a character you have to play, and here's your lines. You read your lines, you memorize your lines, and then you get a sense of that character from that. And then you give a performance so that you get it. Whereas Brando's approach is, here's a character, there's some guidelines that I could maybe go by. But most of it will just be me making things up. And the character will just be some sort of weird organic creation that I just kind of create off the cuff as we go. Like, the other characters are saying, like, fed lines to him, which is hilarious. He's going to ad-lib off that, which sounds insane. Like, you can't do that. They have to answer. Then they have their written line that might not make any sense in context of what you just said, right? Like, so you're screwing everybody around you. It's hilarious.
It's
like,
and
he's not, and it's not like he doesn't know this. It's just like, that's what I'm gonna do because I'm Marlon Brando. And to me, if I'm gonna be in this weird, really hot, uncomfortable place, I'm gonna screw around some. He also brought one. I have to say, as much as the movie sucks in a lot of ways, he brought one of the greatest things ever into existence, which was, I have to have a tiny version of myself with me at all time. That was his idea. That wasn't the script. Okay. And that's not in the novel or anything. That was his idea, and I love it. And it's so great. And of course, it gave us the whole mini-me character.
Oh man, I need to watch the movie and the documentary again. As I've actually grown to really like that movie. I've got a copy of it now, and.
But like that was his idea, just makes me love him all the more. It's like, I always thought that was just, in the script. It was like, okay, Mark Moreau's a weirdo and he makes stuff, so he's going to have this little sidekick. I didn't know that Brando just made that up himself. He was just like, I should have a little tiny version of myself, and we'll play the piano together. It's fucking awesome.
I'm going to drape myself in zinc oxide. Is that okay, guys? Okay. And I'm wearing a muumuu. I'm never wearing anything but just some sort of a blanket you're going to put on top of me to cover up my.
Yeah. I've gotten to a certain age, so I'm done with pants.
My Jabba the Hutt body.
I can respect.
I'm done with pants. Where was that? Like Thailand or somewhere they shot that? I couldn't find.
No, it was very remote Australia.
Oh, really? Like, okay.
Australia, but it was like way out. Like it took forever to get out to where they were and stuff. Like they were really cut off from everything. Somewhere in North Queensland, but I remember from the documentary, it took like a super long time just to get out there. They were really cut off from everything.
So probably like northern Australia, would that be like somewhere that was really tropical, right?
Yeah, North Queensland, which is basically kind of like around the northeastern tip of Australia. But so as it turned out, Brando, even though he was being weird and stuff, was actually his ally, and for him, his biggest problem was Kilmer, because Kilmer was going through a divorce. Kilmer was only there because they couldn't get Bruce Willis, and Kilmer just seemed to be in a very, very poor mood from the get-go, and he was very difficult and did all sorts of stuff. And it was also a direct result of what Kilmer was doing. That like they had James Woods there that made James Woods leave, because he basically eliminated James Woods' role because he wanted to. I don't know. It's a little confusing. But James Woods was at one point, there was a character for him. His character basically got eliminated because of whatever Val Kilmer was doing. What does it say? Recast. Oh, okay. So, yeah, Kilmer basically was cast in one role, wasn't happy with it, and forced them, if they're going to keep him, to recast him in the other role, which was James Woods's. So James Woods left. And
he's just sleepwalking to the whole thing anyway, Kilmer.
Oh God, yes. It's pretty obvious.
You've got a perfect storm for a bad picture there when you've got two guys that are notoriously, hard to work with,
But
didn't like a hurricane hit or some sort of a typhoon hit and like destroy a large part of the set or delay shooting for a long time or something too? Wasn't that part of the
I think that happened after Stanley was gone, though, didn't it?
Okay.
I think that was after, because the other thing is, for people who don't know, he was fired really fast. They only got in like a couple days of shooting before they fired him.
Right.
Like, we described this as a long, ongoing thing with a lot of problems, and it was. But he was only there for the beginning of it. So a lot of the trouble production stuff, again, was completely separate from him. It was after he was gone, except the hilarious thing, again, is that he wasn't gone. He didn't actually leave, which I love. Like, they just found out he just hung around to sort of watch. And nobody knew it, like, for the longest time.
Right? He had a mask on.
Yeah, and that's what it was. He just blended in with the extras. Like, I assume maybe a few people knew, but like anybody at the top, they did not know. They just thought he was gone. Like, I love that.
It's got to be fucked up because, he's probably been working on this project for years,
Mm-hmm.
And he gets fired off of it so quickly. And I don't know. It's got to be tough.
Yeah. So they only filmed 3 days, and they had some sort of like emergency meeting of the executives. And so they fire Stanley by fax.
By fax.
He shreds the documents in anger, and then they were supposed to drive him to the airport, but they never did because he disappeared. Because he was still there. I mean, that's just great. Yes, false rumors spread about his allegedly erratic behavior, which apparently is not true. But his main reasons appear to have been his perceived unwillingness to deal with studio executives, especially his problems to deal with Kilmer, who already had a well-established reputation for being difficult and would soon be enshrined in movie lore thanks to this film. That's funny.
Man, if this film had been more successful, this would be a very well-known story. Like, when what's his name was fired off Back to the Future and stuff.
Oh yeah, Eric Stoltz.
Yeah. That's like a well-known thing among cinephiles.
Sure.
So,
It's a different case, though, right? Like, Back to the Future, nobody knew it was going to be good, but had the potential to be good, but it was just like, it's not working. We don't have the right guy. Sorry, we have to fire you. Then they bring in Michael J. Fox, and everything clicks. Everything's awesome. It's just the way they want it. Movie's huge phenomenon. Whereas in this, it's just like, it seems like they made the wrong choice. Like, maybe the movie wouldn't have been amazing, but it's hard to believe it would have been worse, right? Like, can you really think it would have been worse if they hadn't fired him? Because I don't.
Have you seen the some of the footage with Stoltz in there?
I meant in this movie, but yeah, I've seen the footage with Stoltz.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, and that's also clear too. That yeah, like sometimes I think, you know, as much as I like film and I'm into film, there are more subtle things about film and acting that it's true I don't get. So sometimes those things, like when they're saying, "Oh, he's not right for the character," I don't really know. But even in that, was apparent to me that Eric Stoltz, you know, and it is hard though. There's just all this bias in your head, right? Marty McFly. Obviously, it's Michael J. Fox, you know. So just seeing anybody else just seems so weird. But even trying to take myself out of that headspace, no, he doesn't seem right. Yeah, I've seen the footage.
You know what's interesting? I recently watched Teen Wolf again.
Yeah.
And the house in Teen Wolf is the same house they used in Back to the Future. They were actually.
I haven't seen Teen Wolf in so many years. I know a lot of people really like. I get a kick out of it, I guess, but that's about it. Like, I have no desire to own the movie. I don't think, and I'm a big Michael J. Fox fan too, and yet that movie to me is just a little footnote. Yeah, that's a fun movie. Like,
sure, yeah. I mean, I feel the same way. I liked it a lot when I was a kid, but it doesn't really have a lot for me to chew on anymore. You know, so
right.
I was just watching it with the commentary is the only reason that I rewatched it. But they were scouting when they were shooting Teen Wolf. They were scouting locations for Back to the Future. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Apparently, Fairuza Balk threatened to leave because she was mad about them firing Stanley, and that she was going to drive to Sydney, which is a 2,500 kilometer drive. But then somebody stopped her and basically said, "Oh, you'll never work again if you break your contract." So they made her go. But yeah, it was John Frankenheimer that was brought in, who has had his successes and stuff, some good movies. But it is true that he sort of had a reputation as being like a bit of a curmudgeon. You know, we talked about various directors, and of course, directors are artistic people. And we talked when we did our New Hollywood about the auteur thing and stuff like that. John Frankenheimer seems to be almost the opposite of that. And I don't want to characterize him too harshly because it's not like I know a lot about him, but just some of the stuff they said about him in that documentary and some of the other stuff I've read about him seems to suggest that, like, he was very, you know, let's get the picture made and go home. Yeah. And in this one, you can really understand him having a mercenary thing to it, because he's just brought in. It's not his project. He's just brought in to do it. So I understand that he's not really attached to the subject matter or the actors or anything that's going on, but still, just the way it's portrayed, it just makes it sound like he's just like, all right, I don't give a fuck. Just, you know,
he's just a by the numbers guy.
By the numbers guy, which, I mean, you do need those people. You do.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of takes the art aspect out of it. It's more of it's just a business move. You know, you could be doing anything, you know?
Sure. Because, I mean, I'm thinking about his movies, and, like, what's his most artistic movie? Like, Birdman of Alcatraz, maybe? Like, most of them are not very artistic.
It almost sounds like a television director. You know, that's the way those guys are. They go in, you know, shoot, print, you know, move on to the next one.
His last, like, theatrical movie was Reindeer Games. So we'll just let that stand for itself.
Yeah, that speaks for itself, huh?
Oh, he did Black Sunday. That's an interesting movie. It's not that well done. Not that I'm gonna blame him, but that's about the Munich thing, the 1972 Olympics, where the terrorists killed the athletes.
Another Munich movie.
Well before Munich, but yeah, Black Sunday, which is what it will become to be known as. Yeah, John Frankenheimer, the name.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Because even he had a big clash with Kilmer too, right? It's not like he came and everything went back to normal. Like, Kilmer was just going to be pissy anyway, because it's like Frankenheimer stated afterwards, "I don't like Val Kilmer. I don't like his work ethic, and I don't want to be associated with him ever again." There are two things I'll never do in my whole life. The first is that I will never climb Mount Everest. The second is that I will never work with Val Kilmer ever again. If I was making the Val Kilmer story, I wouldn't hire that prick. That's pretty good.
Val Kilmer's the one trying to get attached to this Top Gun remake bullshit they're trying to do. Or sequel, whatever the hell it is.
Oh yeah, that's right. And besides the divorce Kilmer was going through, this was right after Brando's daughter had committed suicide.
Oh wow.
Like, I knew that had happened, but I didn't know the timeline for it. This was right then.
I guess I knew about that.
Yeah, The Island of Dr. Moreau received 6 nominations for the Razzie Awards, including Worst Picture and Worst Director, winning Worst Supporting Actor for Marlon Brando.
Wow.
But that's got to be a kick in the teeth, too, to be Frankenheimer, to just come into this project and get it done, and then you get nominated for Worst Director.
There's a documentary I've been meaning to watch called "Listen to Me, Marlon." I don't know if you've
heard the name.
It's just it's hundreds of hours of audio that Marlon Brando recorded that they've cut down into some interesting stories.
Yeah, I'll have to see it sometime. Brando's always been a very interesting figure.
Yeah, not necessarily around this time, but before that.
Yeah. So Hardware, one of the reasons it got the American release date it did was through Miramax because the Weinsteins picked it up.
Okay.
And I mean, we've talked about how prolific they are and all the stuff they've done. What happened there? How come you think? I mean, couldn't he ever have given them a call, or was like that just not possible? Think of like a foot in the door for him to, make films again. I'm not saying, I can't speak for him. Maybe he's happy with what he's doing. He seems like he's content. I'm just saying, I just feel like as a movie fan, I feel a bit like we're missing out on what could be some good movies by a good director that, had a fairly promising start. Then some stuff happened, and now he just isn't on the scene anymore. And that just seems really unfortunate. He's still only 50 years old. I don't know. It just seems so unfortunate.
I mean, look at guys like
some masterpiece or anything like that. Hardware, it is what it is. I think it's a very interesting movie. It's very interesting visually. It's has stuff to it. Good enough performances for the world it's in. I think it's a really enjoyable movie. It's kind of like a low budget movie done right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm very interested in seeing Dust Devil. I've heard Dust Devil's kind of less of a success, but still, I don't know.
No, check it out. You would,
for sure.
It. But yeah, this film came out, and I didn't see it until maybe 10 years ago or so. It was kind of had a little bit of a cult status, but
yes,
someone put this out on DVD, and it really seemed to gain a lot of fans that way. Like Synapse or someone put out a Blu-ray and a DVD of this. And it was even featured on an episode of The Office. They were talking about this movie. One of the characters wanted to watch it, and the other, he called it a mixture of Wall-E and horror. So I thought that was kind of
yeah. This movie's kind of like got some Wall-E action.
Sure. But
in that you've got a devastated Earth, you've got a weird robot thing.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. Yeah,
it's like a sinister Wall-E.
Instead of cleaning up garbage, he's cleaning up the human garbage.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't like to make the comparison, but I mean, there's parts of the movie where Jill's running around being chased by this thing. It's kind of like a sinister Johnny Five is trying to kill her.
But yeah, Stanley wrote a sequel to this, but it never got greenlit.
Oh, I didn't know that.
For some reason. I don't know why. Hardware 2 Ground Zero. Makes you wonder. It got stalled because the rights to the original are split between several parties. One being Miramax and producer Paul Trabitz.
I'm seeing now that Dust Devils has all sorts of different cuts that Miramax cut 20 minutes out of it. And then they made a final cut, which put some stuff back in.
See, I've heard Miramax is really hard to work with, too, so maybe he had a really bad time with them as well.
They're infamous for cutting shit, right?
Oh, yeah. And for,
Yeah, so maybe that's a door he didn't want to open again. Maybe he didn't really like the Weinsteins and their input. I mean, they'd already been a little pushy on him about the casting for Hardware.
Was that them that was saying that? Like they wanted to Americanize the...
They wanted it to be less British.
That's why Mcdermott was in there, and probably Jill was American as well. And, Iggy Pop was super American sounding.
Yeah.
That's right, guys. Get your hamburger hot dog and baseball time.
You know what's like a horrible poor man's version of this movie? That like tries to take all this stuff and do the same things and like fall completely on its face? Tank Girl.
Oh, yeah. People love that movie, man, but I don't.
That movie blows. That movie's terrible. Like I said, as we said, when we talked about sort of like a cyberpunk or sort of a post-apocalyptic future, that's a great example of it done terribly.
I think of that and like Johnny Mnemonic and all that type of shit. Like it came out around the same period of time, and it's all trying to latch onto that, cyberpunk style. But I didn't care for a lot of those movies.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of cyberpunk, but it can absolutely be done wrong. And those are some good examples.
Well, I mean, like, you think of stuff like, Appleseed and I think of some other good ones. There are quite a few. We talked about the Animatrix on here.
Which Appleseed? The anime?
Yeah.
Yeah. Bubblegum Crisis.
There's a Japanese film that I like a lot called Returner. This is making me want to go watch it again. It's a really good film.
I don't think I've actually seen it, although I know what the poster looks like. I can picture it in my head. Probably seen it on various sites.
Sure. Like Ghost in the Shell, that's...
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I'm going to talk about, like, the ultimate cyberpunks, it's like Blade Runner.
The first one.
Blade Runner and Ghost in the Shell are probably the two at the top. But some other... Then there's ones with very, very, very slight that still work. Like, it's not even set too far in the future. And this is a movie I always thought was totally underrated, is Strange Days.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like one of those set 5 minutes into the future movies. So it's not like all cyberpunky, but it still has those elements. And that's a cool movie. I wish it wasn't Ralph Fiennes because I just find him really off-putting.
Me too.
And I can't unsee him as Francis Dollarhide is one of the main problems. Like, I remember like watching Maid in Manhattan with my mom, which is like this romantic comedy where he's romantically cast opposite Jennifer Lopez, and all I can think is Francis Dollarhide's gonna eat you, he's gonna kill you. Like, we watched it because it was shot at the same hotel that I stayed at when I was in New York 4 years ago. So that's why I was watching it, to see my hotel.
Okay. I'm sure that was used in quite a few movies then.
Oh, here is something I want to tell you. So speaking of things being shot places I know, so this is weird. So a few months ago, allegedly, supposedly, on Spike TV back in June, they released a series based on Stephen King's The Mist.
Mm-hmm.
Not here. Did not exist. Did not come up on our Spike. And did you see any of it?
I recorded it, and I don't think I'm going to watch it because everyone says it's terrible.
It's not good. It's not terrible, but it's not good. But I was just going to say, like, well, here's the thing. Like, there's curse words and stuff on it. Really? Would that happen for you on Spike? Because my version of Spike, everything's cut. And what was really weird is when we first got Spike around 2006 or whatever, when it first came out up here, I guess, was they literally had commercials that said, like, stuff was uncut and stuff was all cut to shit. So is the American version uncut? Like, is there cursing on Spike?
Well, I can watch it and let you know because, like, I see stuff. I mean, they say shit like every other word on just like regular cable television now. So
yeah, because I mean, I watch Spike, which is a terrible channel, and the only thing I really watch on right now is fights. But like, I'll even see they bleep everything on Cops, for instance.
Right.
But But anyway, my point is I wanted to see the movie. I wanted to see The Mist because, well, I kind of like The Mist, and also because it was supposedly shot in Halifax, where I live. Now, what's funny is just a few days ago, it came out on Netflix, I guess on Canadian Netflix, calling itself a Netflix original series, which I know is not true.
Right.
But anyway, so I've been watching it, and I've watched about 6 episodes now. Obviously, most of it's inside anyway, because there's a mist. So it's only like the first 2 episodes. But yeah, none of it's like shot here. It's all shot, presumably, I guess, in like communities outside of the city, because the whole point is it's supposed to be like in a small town. But so I'm trying to get people I know to watch it to see if they, not you obviously, but if they recognize any of it, because like they show like a shot from above of like a little town with a church, and I'm just like, that looks like every single town here. That could be literally like that could be anywhere except here, because Halifax is a fairly big city. Like, and there's a football field, and I'm like, that's not St. Mary's, so I don't know what that is and stuff. Like, I don't recognize any of it. But once you get into like the 3rd episode, it doesn't matter anyway, because everything is internal because the mist. So everybody's inside. But yeah, no, it's not a very good series. The characters are all sucky. And I mean, the point of the mist is like, you know, it's more about how people suck than humans, than the monsters anyway. You know, we're worse than the monsters, blah, blah. Because the whole thing in, like, The Mist, you know, the original novella and the movie is, you know, how it brings out the worst in people. People turn on each other. So this is just that stretched out, which makes it worse, right? Like, pretty much nobody's redeeming. What's really funny is now, in a way, I guess I'm not against this, because it speaks to the point of, yeah, everybody has their flaws and we can have bad people and stuff, but so they've got like a teenage kid and he's gay and they make him creepy as hell. And I'm just thinking, okay, that's fine, I guess, but I wonder if that's really good. Like, is that, like, would gay people be happy with that representation? Because, like, you know, just because they're going to make some people, I mean, I know you shouldn't, but it's going to make some people watch this and just associate gay with, like, creepy as hell, because that's what this kid is like. He's so creepy, and it's like every shot of him, it's just awful. You should just watch just to see that kid. It's terrible. But I don't know. I'll get through it. I'm about 6 episodes in. There's 10 episodes. I'll see it through. But yeah, there's nothing really to like. And what's really annoying is because it's drawn out. So I mean, if you watch, say, the 2007 movie, it doesn't take very long before you see the monsters. I'm 7 episodes in, and you see almost nothing.
That's what I've heard.
Like, the worst thing that happens is, like, sometimes bugs will land on a person, and then they'll die. But no, like, big mutated monsters at all. Because one of the things they add in this is, like, the mist also seems to have some sort of, like, weird psychological effect, in that it will sort of, like, make you see the things you're afraid of, which I really don't think is needed. Because at one point, like, some priest goes out in it, and what he sees is the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And they, like, drag him away. And I was like, that's not like the mist. But this, they just add this whole weird angle where, yeah, this whole angle, instead of just being their monsters in the mist, it's like, oh, the mist makes you see what you fear most, or something. I don't know. Which doesn't really make any sense, but.
It felt like such a promising show. Because, I feel like you could easily do a show on that, but.
Yeah.
I mean,
it has its moments. There's, it's not all bad, but I wouldn't call it good or bad. It's a very bland show, is what I would say. Mostly because the characters are so bland. Like, you're just like, I don't care about these people. Like, I like maybe one character. There's a guy. He's the very first character you see. He's like a soldier who was obviously at the base or whatever when things went wrong, and he's got amnesia, and I kind of like him. Everybody else is pretty crappy. But I'll see it through. There's only like 3 more episodes, so I'll watch the rest. But I don't know if it sucks, but I guess people can have the luxury of saying that now because there's so many shows. So like it's like, why would you bother? So I get that, right? There's so many shows. Is this really worth your time when there's this and this? No. So yeah, I get. So if people want to say it sucks, I get it from that standpoint, because it's like, yeah, there's like 12 other shows you could name off the top of your head that you should watch instead, like easily.
Let me give you an example. The other day, someone on Twitter randomly sent me this this message, personal message. It says, Jay, The Mist just came on Netflix where I live. He must be Canadian. I'm not sure. Yeah. I didn't make it into the 2nd episode. That shit sucked hard. Now I must curl into a ball because the realization hit me. No more good monster movies to come.
That sucks. Yeah, and even though it's shot here, there's no Canadian actors whatsoever. I thought sometimes when they do that, there's none. But hey, if you ever wanted to see what the woman who did the voice of Pocahontas looks like, she's in there.
Really?
Yeah.
She Native American or Native?
Yeah, she's Native American. She's Native American.
Is that right? First Peoples? Is that what you guys call them?
Yeah, we say First Peoples or Indigenous Peoples or whatever. Actually, there's a big thing going on right now where the Prime Minister wants to, like, I don't know, tear down and redo the Indigenous Affairs stuff. I don't know. That's all being dredged up because of the shit that's happening with you guys, by the way. So thanks for that. All that stuff about Confederate statues and stuff. Well, that's all coming up here now. Now people are flipping out about John A. Macdonald and stuff because we obviously have our own history of, politicians that did terrible things to people of other races. So now, like, John A. Macdonald was our first ever prime minister, and he had some very awful policies when it came to the indigenous people. So that stirred up a whole thing up here. So,
well, I mean, yeah, if we're going to get right down to it, I mean, we could probably tear down the statues of everyone for, a couple hundred years ago because they were all probably awful people in one way or another.
Yeah. Especially in the context of, like, race and stuff like that.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
but at the same time, it is true. It's kind of, I understand the fallacy in that argument too, because it is true that back when John A. Macdonald was doing that, even though that was more acceptable in the time, it's not like there weren't people saying this is wrong. There were white Canadians saying you shouldn't be doing this then. So it is sort of a weak excuse. So I don't know. I don't even necessarily fall on one side of the argument. All I can say is, yes, it's problematic. He was our first prime minister. He did great things in unifying the country, but also he did some bad things. I don't know. But I don't think, like, going around, like, wearing shirts that say, like, fuck Canada on our 150th anniversary are very nice, which is something some, like, native protester has been doing lately. I can't remember her name. I was reading an article she wrote the other day, and I was just like, that's not helpful. Like, all that does is just stir things up and divide people. It's because there's people like me that's like, yeah, like, I do acknowledge bad things in our history, and I'm all for going forward and making the future better, making the country better. You don't do that by, like, making people feel, like, guilty and shitty because they like their country.
Yeah, but shouldn't we learn from that? Like, learn from those mistakes?
Exactly.
And, as, the world,
that's what I mean. You don't come out to somebody waving your flag and say, you shouldn't do that. Like, that doesn't help the problem. Because it's like, yes, you have to acknowledge your mistakes. Hopefully we can learn from them and move forward so we don't make them in the future, make the country a better place. But when somebody's, like, waving their Canada flag, you shouldn't come up to them and be like, hey, you shouldn't do that because blah, 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 blah. Like, that's not helpful. I mean, it's a tough thing, and I didn't mean to get into it and stuff. And I mean, again, I get it. I can't speak to how it feels to be an Indigenous person in Canada and realize that a lot of the history of the country that I'm supposed to be loyal to did a lot of shit to my people. I get it. I can't feel that, but I mean, I can understand it, and I do feel bad about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a problem you can't solve too. I mean, unless you have a time machine, we can't go back and change these things. So, I mean, it's really no reason to be upset about it now.
But I mean, that's the thing about most people that are remembered in history is, like, it's the real world. Mm-hmm. It's not like heroes and villains. There's people that did good things that also did bad things. There's good people that did bad things. There's bad people that did good things and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's even because, even take, like, the most least controversial figure you can come up with in, say, American or Canadian history. Think of them, like, it still wouldn't be right to just put them on some pedestal like they're some great hero, because it's probably not true. Like, even if there isn't, like, some skeleton in their past of, like, this or that, because I mean, still, I don't think we have it as much as you guys do. We do have it, but I mean, that's a thing that comes up. There's a certain mentality in America where people try to think of their glorious history, and they put it wrong, because you'll often hear those people with their weird thing. It's like, what would the founding fathers think? As if the founding fathers are, like, these amazing, incredible people that were just above reproach. It's just like, oh, if only the founding fathers could see what the country's like nowadays. I'd be like, the founding fathers were as human as the people running the country now, and they were as flawed. And yes, they founded the country, which is great, but yeah. So
the thing is that you didn't have this this internet to document every aspect of their lives, so it may not be as well known that didn't Ben Franklin have like 100-something children across the world? You know,
no, somebody did.
You know,
might have been
Thomas Jefferson had children with a bunch
Thomas
of
Jefferson
slaves,
sure as fuck did, yeah.
I mean, all these guys killed Native Americans, you know. I mean, maybe not Ben Franklin, but, you know, all these guys did that stuff, you know. It was awful.
Yeah. As I said, here in Halifax, the founder of Halifax is Edward Cornwallis. And there's always been, even well before this, there's been quite a bit of a controversy about his statue because he made a law that put a bounty on the Micmac people. So, yeah, I mean, that's what Halifax is. Halifax was the best area. That's why they built it here. But that's not because there was nobody here. The Micmacs knew it was the best area. That's why they were here. And then the English came and kicked them out. And, you know, and that's just basically how European conquest of the New World worked. And it's a terrible thing. And I'm not proud of it. Nobody should be. But it's problematic.
Well, it's problematic now because, I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, what is the solution to the problem? There is none. You know, I mean, we can talk about it forever, but, you know.
No.
It sucks.
I mean,
what's done is done.
I mean, the best solution is just to acknowledge it.
Right.
Accept that, you know, there were things that were bad and they were made, and try to forge a world where those sorts of things don't happen anymore. And I realize that, especially when you're coming after decades of oppression and genocide and things like that, it's like, well, yeah, we can't wipe the slate clean. No, nobody's saying wipe the slate clean, because that's not possible, but it's, I don't know. But at the same time, it is kind of difficult to be living in the world today and having somebody tell you that because you're a part of a certain ethnic group or something like that, you're somehow complicit in something that happened, you know, decades before your birth. I'm not. I'm not complicit. But anyway, I didn't mean to go off on that tangent. And as I said, I'm not trying to make an argument or start an argument. I'm just saying it's a problematic thing. It's a complicated issue, and whatever side somebody's on, you know, that's kind of the problem. That you shouldn't. It's not the type of thing that has one side or another side, and yet people want to break it down to that sort of thing.
I just feel like we're becoming more divided as people based upon our skin color, and I really think that's the complete opposite way to go as far as coexisting.
Sure, and it's the complete opposite of really what these countries were supposed to be about when they were founded. Yeah. Or at least moving forward, because yes, I get when they were founded, still some bad policies here and there. When I say some bad policies, that's really not... I just mean it was an ideal and it took time to get there, and we're still trying to get there. It's an ongoing process, and at least let's be happy with the progress that's been made, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Let's move forward and not backwards.
Because I would never say to somebody like in the U.S. who's black, you know, that talks about slavery, I would never say, "Oh, get over it." Just like I would never say to somebody, just like I would never say to a First Nations person about, you know, all the stuff their people went through here. "Oh, get over it." I wouldn't say that at all. I'd be like, "Yes, that's true," but I would also say, let's move forward and, I don't know, try to get along. Anyway, that got a lot deeper than we meant for it to. We apologize, but, you know, stuff seeps in, as it is wont to do.
Seems this was a reoccurring theme lately.
Sure. It's hard to get away from, even when we try our escapes here and stuff like that. What can we do? But anyway, this was 1990s hardware. Definitely, especially if you're into cyberpunk, because as we said, there's some good cyberpunk, but there's some fairly shitty cyberpunk too. I think this is an example of good cyberpunk, particularly when you take into account that it had a low budget and that it was a fairly inexperienced filmmaker at the time, fairly young guy, and you probably could say the same about a lot of the crew. Not a lot of names in there as far as effects and stuff goes, but it all came together pretty well. Has a neat sort of punk rock sensibility to it. Has a great look. The story's nothing amazing. The characters are nothing amazing, but they're good enough for what they are. It fits in. I don't know. I think it's a really fun watch, and it really gets me interested in seeing some more of his work, particularly Dust Devil, because these are really the main films that he did before things
Pretty much
went off the rails. And as I said, I know that I've only seen one movie and I'm hoping to see the other, and yet I seem to be so high on him. But I don't know. I just can't help it. There's just something about the way he comes across in interviews and stuff like that, too, in addition to his work, that just seems like this guy has the tools to be a really effective director that could make movies that aren't just like artistic, but also, that would appeal to a fairly large audience. So which is ostensibly what you want from films, right? You want films to be commercially successful. You want them to appeal to as wide an audience as possible. That's not possible with certain films, obviously, because it's more of a niche thing. But I believe he had that ability, that he was, marketable, that studios, executives, whatever, could have put some money behind him and made some money from him. And it's unfortunate the way things turned out. Again, I don't know him personally or anything like that. Maybe he's fine with, again, there's no point in, I suppose, being bitter or thinking about what ifs, what happened, we are where we are. But I'd like to think it's not too late. Again, he's 50 years old. He's been working all this time doing stuff. I'd love to see him get a shot to do a feature-length film, even if it has to go back to low budget again. I'm not saying, let's give him the next Avengers movie. No, and that's not even my point. Like, don't give him something like that. Like, see if he has a script he wants to do, because he's been doing writing all this time too. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It just seems like I would love to see him get another shot.
Sure. Well, yeah, I totally agree. It's, as a lot of directors have said, the environment is different, very different from where it was, sure, even just 20 years ago. It's probably not a very good place for a creative mind to be, for an artistic mind to be. Is you have to really be, put the budget front and center. And
yes.
I don't know. It's just kind of sad as someone who, really appreciates that, that aspect of film. I'd love to see more directors like, him get a chance. And, I just don't know why there aren't, I would hope that he's been offered, opportunities to do other films since. That he's just.
You'd have to think he's gotten some.
Yeah, I would hope so.
I realized the whole thing was a debacle, but would that completely blacklist him? It doesn't seem like that. It seems like there were plenty of people that were working with him at that time on that movie that were, on his side. Fairuza Balk was one of them. I'm not saying she has huge influence, but clearly there were people there that he was working with that were fine with him and thought he was a good director.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like her a lot too.
Yeah, she's cool.
I know you
still
like
the best. Still the best Dorothy. Still the best Dorothy. It's kind of funny because she's so sweet and cute in that, and then she got typecast as she got older to be like sort of like a wacky slut or a
goth chick,
or angry girl and stuff.
Was she in The Craft? I want to say she was in The Craft.
Yes, she absolutely was in The Craft. Yeah. And she's also, going back to Nazi, she's like the Nazi girlfriend in American History X.
Ah, that's right. She had like the fucked up haircut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she was the neo-Nazi there and stuff. And yeah, she's always been like either, like a tough girl or like wacky slut or something. Like she's like a wacky slut in that Adam Sandler movie.
The Waterboy?
The Waterboy.
That's what I was thinking about, yeah.
Yeah. But she nailed Dorothy Gale when she was a kid. She had that great sweetness and innocence with a little bit of toughness and determination. Loved it. It's pretty easy when you stack up against Judy Garland. I'll always love The Wizard of Oz. It's a great movie for a lot of things, but if you're going to talk about being an adaptation of the novel, it's pretty stupid. And Judy Garland was way too old. And she was part of that whole acting style of the 30s and 40s that's just ridiculous. She's like, oh, how awful. Like everything's, everything's so over the top and stupid.
Yeah. It goes with the times, I guess.
It goes with the times, so there's no point in attacking it. But I just mean, yeah. But if still, nobody's really touched that since Fairuza Balk, and I just think Fairuza Balk did a great job. And that was her first ever movie. I still have the VHS of it that has a little intro where she's actually in the intro and talks about it.
Oh wow, that's cool. She, I was gonna say, have you ever seen The Worst Witch? I'm sure you probably have.
No.
86. She was right.
Oh, so she's still about the same age, yeah. No, I haven't seen that.
It's a children's movie, but it's not bad.
Yeah, I recognize the title. Yeah,
they've recently done a remake series of that on Netflix, and my kids have been watching that, which they like the original film too. But I could have sworn that she had a part in that, but I guess not. I was thinking that I saw her in the cast somewhere, but I'm not seeing it now. But yeah, I've always liked her a lot.
But yeah, so here's to Richard Stanley. Maybe someday in the future we'll get to see him do another film under whatever circumstances. I would certainly be interested, and I'll definitely be trying to track Dust Devil down soon, because it sounds like something that would appeal to me. Also, for people watching, totally, as we did if we spent a lot of this episode talking about it, like, you should seek out that documentary because it is very interesting. And in turn, seeing that documentary makes watching the movie, The Island of Dr. Moreau, admittedly not a good movie, but it becomes much more interesting watching it, having seen the documentary and knowing what you know. And plus, movies that fail in that kind of way are always kind of interesting anyway. Plus, The Island of Dr. Moreau is still one of the more famous stories in fiction. It deserves to have a good adaptation at some point. I've seen things that take cues from it and they're inspired by it, but not something that is like a straight adaptation of it. Although, as you said, The Island of Lost Souls is fairly close from what I've heard, right? Yeah. So I haven't seen that. It's like in the 60s, isn't it?
I believe so.
It's an older.
It was black and white. It may be before 60s. Yeah, right around in there.
One of my favorite episodes of Batman in the animated series has a Island of Dr. Moreau thing going on. You remember that one with Tigress?
I do.
With Tigress. That was pretty cool.
Well, this is 32 was when that film was made. Well, hold on.
32? I thought it was like in the 60s. Wow.
They remade it again.
Okay, maybe that's what I was thinking of. Sure.
Old. Yeah. Yeah, maybe it is.
Sounds about right.
I've seen another one. Yeah, I guess that is the one that I remember. Yeah. Bela Lugosi's in there.
Huh. That's cool. But yeah, besides being cyberpunk, you could also make an argument this movie's sort of sci-fi horror in the way like the Alien movies were. It has that gore factor, some heavy violence, some trippy stuff. Set apart again by its sort of unique setting and the sex stuff, which is funny, but also fitting.
Yeah, if you like Terminator ripoffs, check it out.
Although, as we said, it deserves more credit than just being a Terminator ripoff. But
well, I'm joking.
It deserves more credit than that, for sure.
But I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up here.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up. And for once, I think we're a little ahead of the game, and I think we know what we're going to do next week, or at least the ballpark. What was that one? What was the title?
Bleeder.
Yes, Bleeder.
Bleeder. Nicholas Winding Refn.
Right. So you can, guys, give it a heads up. You can expect that one. Failing that, although I'm sure it'll be fine, I think probably if we found a scenario where that wasn't workable, we would still do one of his films. So at the very least, probably a film by that director. But most likely we'll be hitting you with Bleeder next week. So good to get a little ahead because we were playing catch up for a few weeks and stuff. So we're going to try to do that. So so we've both seen some of his work. That's one I haven't seen, so this will be another movie that I'll be seeing for the first time. So looking forward to that. So, but yeah, failing that, at the very least, it will be one of his films. So that at least gives you guys a bit of a ballpark, something to go with. But we'll confirm that on Twitter once we know. So look for that.
Well, we'll see you next time, guys. Thanks for watching.
Thanks a lot. The Pocket Dimension. I'm Cole. That's Jay. Thanks, and we'll see you again in a week. Have a good one. Peace.